Hey gang, it's Platt here, and today we're taking our wine series down under. That's right, we're headed to Australia. Australia is the home to the fourth largest wine exporting country in the world. A little over 750 million liters a year get exported. Their number one customer right now is China, but for years and years and years it was either the US or the UK. But China has definitely become a player in the world market. Australia is also home to a $2.8 billion domestic wine market. A vast majority of that is consumption of domestic wine. Australians shop locally. Only about a little over 16% of their wine consumption is imported wines. Like I said, they keep it at home. As far as that domestic consumption goes, 50% of it's whites, 35% reds, and then 15% is they do port style wines. There's some dessert wines, sparkling wine, including a sparkling Shiraz, which is a very unique product, and I suggest you give it a try. It's something you just don't see a lot out there. Australia, like South Africa, has a definite start date to their wine industry. In 1788, some vine cuttings made it to New South Wales, which at the time was a penal colony. The vine cuttings actually came from the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa and were brought there again by the people who had to run the penal colony, and they wanted some wine, so they brought those over. And because there's no natural grapevines in Australia, the vines really had no competition as far as the ecosystem goes. The next great leap for Australian wines came in 1833, thanks to a gentleman named James Busby. He's also known as the father of Australian wine business. He brought a variety of wine grapes from France and Spain, and you've then got an increase of grapevine variety, but also quality. You got some of the classic grapes of Europe finally brought down to Australia. Australia, just like South Africa, did not dodge the phylloxera epidemic. It hit most of Australia, especially toward the east, but it didn't hit everywhere. There's still some pockets of Australia still to this day that never got the phylloxera epidemic. One notably is the Barossa Valley, which is today home to some of the oldest grapevines in the world, well over 100, 120, 130 years old. Something interesting to keep an eye out for if you're out wine shopping, something from the Barossa Valley. Wine is produced in every state in Australia. Queensland and the Northern Territory, not so much. There's some, but not that much. Mainly it's into the south and to the southwest part of Australia where the bulk of the wine is produced. Australia is the home to over 60 plus different designated wine regions. They use the term GI, geographic indication. In Australia, the wine industry is regulated by Wine Australia. Similar to what are called GSEs, or government-sponsored entities. Here in the U.S., it's a private/public-private entity, and that's who regulates wine in Australia. And their main focus there is the labeling part. If something's on that bottle, they want to make sure it's correct. They are less into telling the winemakers how to produce, unlike France and a lot of Europe, where the regulation is not just the labeling, but in the process of winemaking. In Australia, it goes from top to bottom. It goes from country to multi-state to state, zone, and then region and sub-region. And it's region and sub-regions that you really want to know are the most important as far as labeling and knowing what you're getting in that bottle. Australia is home to 130 different grape varieties, a lot of variety down there, a lot of room for the winemakers to work with. The major players down there as far as reds go are Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. White grapes, we're looking at Chardonnay, Semillon, and Mourvèdre, or not Mourvèdre, Sauvignon Blanc. The Australia is also home to GSM, the classic blend, Grenache, Shiraz, and Mourvèdre. You might remember from our video in the Rhone, when we discussed the wines Rhone, that is a classic blend in the southern Rhone region. Well, it's also done in Australia. The two most popular grapes by far are Shiraz and Chardonnay, and just those two grapes alone make up 44% of wine production, so those are the heavy hitters there in Australia. The particular wine we're going to try today is the Yellowtail Moscato. Comes in at 7.5% alcohol by volume. We know Moscatos are sweet, and at 7.5% alcohol, we could presume the yeast did not eat up all that sugar. The reason I chose Yellowtails for a couple of reasons. One of the things I noticed when reading about Australian wines is a lot of the Australian winemakers are like, we're not Yellowtail, we're more than Yellowtail. Kind of the doth protest too much kind of thing. And also it kind of reminded me of here in the U.S. a lot of people like, well, we're not Beringer, or we're not Beringer White Zinfandel. But the reality is most people kind of get introduced to wine and finer wines through those type wines. That I've never tried Yellowtail, so I wanted to give them a try. And again, this is probably the brand that most people are going to get introduced to Australian wines through, so we're going to give her a try. A quick little history. The Yellowtail brand was founded by the Casella family that migrated from Sicily in 1957. They got down there, got in the wine business, and then a few years later created their own brand, or create their own vineyard that eventually became the Yellowtail brand. They have a full line of reds and whites. It's labeled Moscato, and in Australia, any varietal that's labeled, it's at least 85% of that varietal. That also goes for vintage years and labeling of regions or whatever. If you see it's from this zone or from this region, you know at least 85% of that is from that zone. The same thing for the vintage year. So we know this is at least 85% Moscato. All right, let's give her a try. All right, like a lot of Moscatos, we have a little effervescence to it, a little bubbly. Let's give her a nose. Very simple sweetness, almost apple-like on the nose. Let's give her a try. Oh yeah, that's sweet. There's a lot of sugar in that. Yeah, that's about it. It's sweet, it's bubbly, it's uncomplicated. That will probably offend no one, really. I say that it's obviously not a connoisseur's, type wine. If you're really into beautiful Bordeaux's and stuff like that, this is not going to be for you. This is not for a sophisticated palate. But again, if you're wanting to introduce people to certain wines, certain regions, give them to try something new. Hey, this is from Australia. Let's try. This is something approachable. Just a good, sweet, probably fun little wine. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please share if you like these videos. The rest of your friends might like a glass of Moscato. Also, feel free to leave any questions, comments, or concerns in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.